say for me, Rematriation is, in this specific context of my history, was about returning myself to the land in a desperation, in an intuitive impulse that's motivated by a kind of longing.
Saludos and welcome to the Rematriating Boriken podcast, where we discuss the journey to the essence of these islands, this archipelago and her surrounding waters, the restoration of our essence before conquest and continued colonialism, the reclamation of our collective healing and liberation. I am Yasmín Hernández, creator of CucubaNación, artist, writer, activist, born and raised in Brooklyn, Rematriating Boriken. I want to give a nod and a cyber hug to everybody who is celebrating this month of Pride, especially the true warriors who were at the Stonewall Inn and launched what became the Pride movement, and all the disciples that follow their beautiful lead. In today's podcast episode, I will be sharing my interview with Melissa Rosario, my friend Meli, who has just recently published her book, Beyond Disaster, Building Collective Futures in Puerto Rico. June 11th, we have a full moon in Sagittarius. I missed this new moon because of all the hecticness of the past week. So that will happen from time to time. But with this full moon, it actually coincides with a reading, a book presentation that we will be doing at CucubaNación in Mayagüez to present Meli's book. So this is the perfect time to share this interview, which was actually recorded in March of 2024. This is so far the only interview that I recorded outside, and I recorded it at CEPA, which is the organization that Meli co-founded. And that beautiful space is based in Río Piedras, across the street from a school. So you're going to hear a lot of activity, a lot of sound. I was recording each interview to capture each person's oral history, testimony around their rematriation journey, more so to inform the painting series Portraits from the Trench that debuted a year ago, and not necessarily to share as a podcast. So even though you're going to hear background sound and other things, what's most important is to share the beautiful essence and power of Meli's words, of what Meli intimately shares as a Nuyorican who moved to Puerto Rico.
With Daca, Melissa Lane, and that's my given name. I always start in this context with I'm a third generation Nuyorican. I still remain that. But I returned to Borikén in 2016. I am definitely queer. I am on my indigenous reclamation journey. I am warming up to the idea or recognizing more and more of myself as not only femme but non-binary, which is languaging that I feel like the youth have brought into my world and understanding. Before I was just say femme AG in the old school. But I think all of us have binary, that duality within us, and we navigate it in different ways. What else would I say? I often say I'm also the product of a Black Puerto Rican father and a white Puerto Rican and Italian mom. A very, I would say, New York mix. And that consciousness of myself as in between categories, identities, worlds was always very present for me growing up and continues to be. That's why I still affirm the Nuyorican-ness, even though I've lived here now 7 years, and that's a complete cycle. So I might be becoming something else, but when I lived in the diaspora, I used to feel the need to reject that part of myself as someone who grew up in the US was more present because I guess of that experience of living in that belly of the beast. And now here, I can see, based on my relationship with my partner, who was born and raised, schooled, and says I only spent a month out of the island at a time. To me, who spent, when did I get here? I'm 40 now, so 33. I can see that there are things about my upbringing and my worldview that is definitely not from here, entre comillas. I also feel a deep affinity with the wind, and am learning to understand still what that medicine is about. And part of my rematriation journey was also really about healing the womb. So there's a fraught but also important relationship with the water. And I'm a Taurus, so tierra hasta el fin. Tierra hasta el fin.
So I'm going to come back to that womb question. But before I do, as part of your intro, I would love for you to talk about where we are right now,
Sure.
donde nos encontramos.
Sure. We are in el espacio de la Casa de CEPA. We're right now in front of the apartment that we use for the visita solidaria. Estamos en parte de la huerta, el conuco, de la casita, also as Yas and some other compas have said, kind of like an urban forest. Estamos en Río Piedras, in Hyde Park. We're in front of a private school, but the sounds of the children are part of the soundscape of this place. This is home. Both for like that seed dream of this project that came with me from the diaspora that has evolved into something much more. And also my physical home where I live. De la visita solidaria se creó para gente principalmente de diáspora y dentro del contexto de isla que no viven en la metro. This is part of the dual way that we vision it. So this is like the home space for the folks who pass through here and who are interested in rematriation or who are working on reconnecting and considering that possibility, which I think is a longing for a lot of diaspora people. Can I go home? Is this my home? What does it look like? What does it mean? So, sí.
Yo creo que algo necesario para también establecer y descubrir que home could be a journey and that going home can happen right within wherever we are.
Primer territorio. And the colonization process is so effective at disconnecting us from our bodies and the inner wisdom that we have. So, absolutely, that was one of the things. We had this dream that we were going to be on the land, and we still want to be in a rural context eventually. The dream of stewarding tierra, bosque, que sí, ¿verdad? La densidad de la madre, tener eso más cerca. But also we had this challenge of recognizing that everywhere we are, we're on the land. Everywhere. Esto es tierra. So that return began here.
What is CEPA?
CEPA, Center for Embodied Pedagogy and Action. La cepa, the plant, the part that connects the trunk to the roots. CEPA is also generational, refers to that iteration practice of la cepa, la segunda, la tercera. And it's a healing justice organization that we're really interested in how you start decolonizing in mind, body, and spirit, which is by reconnecting or deepening the relationships that we have to one another, to our bodies, to the land. We do it's a very diverse project because I feel like that's what that decolonization walk kind of asks us to do to deepen. So we do a lot of things. We design curriculum through CEPA. We hold practice groups, medicine circles. We have the visitor program. We make medicine with the plants from Puerto Rico. It's really all about looking towards how do we decolonize from the point of view of our day-to-day life, la cotidianidad. Que esto no es una cosa lejos, es aquí. And within that also ancestral reclamation, which could start with just even recognizing the plants that arrive here on the wind. And just, hey, who are you? Let me learn. You've come here. You have some medicine for me. Bien, bien. And we're 7, el equipo estelar, but this project is principally anchored by myself and my partner, Capital. And I was a visual artist, and I'm trained as an anthropologist. So now I can say for me, Rematriation is, in this specific context of my history, was about returning myself to the land in a desperation, in an intuitive impulse that's motivated by a kind of longing that then pushes you into that unknown. Right? And the initiation is that second movement. So you're like, ¿Qué yo hice? Esto fue un error. And I always stuck with me what you had said to me once of like, it's in the diaspora, the soul is broke or weak, but the body could be whole. And then you come home and it's the reverse. And then at the same time, the brokenness of the body, because I feel like it's like we feeling also what the land has lived through and what motivated our family to leave too. You know, like you can see that and you can feel it. And so that affects the body in a particular way. That's like the initiation.
I want to come back to you sort of build this whole thing about anchoring Taurus, La Tierra, but you also mentioned reinserting yourself in the land and healing the womb. So when I moved here, I used to say I returned to the womb. My question is, can you speak to rematriation as that return to the womb?
Yeah, sure. Couple things. Well, I think rematriation and that difference between it and repatriation is that focus on reclaiming or restoring the matriarchal wisdom, which, you know, that was like that first colonial act of like not recognizing the caciques who were feminine and not refusing to speak to them, and that dismissal as part of that rematriation, the restoring. And for me, a lot of that gets housed in the womb, my physical body, I can speak to it. I always had struggles, or that was where a lot of my chronic challenges were, reproductive health and what it is I'm birthing. So there was this kind of paradox of returning, and then the womb became much more loud. I, at 35, so 2 years after I got here, I had a chocolate cyst appear on my left womb, on my left ovary, which is the same ovary that my mother had a chocolate cyst appear at age 35 on the left side. And she had to have an immediate operation. And for me, mine was a much longer process. So when I was 39, I had the surgery, laparoscopic surgery. Y ahí se descubrió un montón de cosas. The endometriosis, which is the endometrium, you know, that prepares the womb to hold the baby, grows all over. And then the body doesn't have a way to release it. And that causes pain at different moments in the cycle. And it's something a lot of doctors, mainstream medicine doesn't really understand it. They don't study it very much. And then they say, oh, probably at menopause, it'll go away. So there's this birthing, like childbirth years, piece. What society expects or demands of people who are assigned feminine at birth and socialized as girls carry. And I think for me, I mostly carried a lot of grief there and a lot of unsaid things. And recently, I don't know if it was Jay or John, but that's how Instagram sometimes creates these memories that it's cloudy who said it, but it was like you have to open your mouth more. You have too much truth, and you can't store it only in your body. And for me, I think there was a storing of truth that I didn't want to see and I didn't want to recognize that got stored there and condensed and screaming. There's a lot of injustice. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of abuse. And sometimes it's not 100% clear, one side, the other, your own participation is grief with that too. And I had to look at all of that. And I had to feel the pain. I had to really feel it. Lo somaticé. Creo que eso era para mí eso era la parte de la iniciación más profunda. And that's like the womb work, or healing the womb as the rematriation. The demands you put on yourself. All that kind of stuff. And you see it for a lot of activists who are AFAB, who are leaders, I know, have also had either cysts or fibroids that grow really big. And there's something there about, that rage also. Because I think the rage of that motivates the activists to get out there. It's not always love. It might start out as love or might at some point transform into love, but rage is a motive. Eso me ayuda a usar mi voz, a gritar en la calle, but also it creates these imbalances, carrying things we don't need and turning them into physical appendages.
Some of us focus on the feminine lineage and the wounds it carries, but also expanding into this lineage that is more transcendent than just focusing on gender, perhaps, pero lineage, ancestralidad, y si estamos sanando en nuestro camino o si estamos sanando el colectivo within our own bodies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first thing is eterno presente. In Arawak or indigenous cosmology, all time is now. So, in that frame, everything we do has an impact that we can't necessarily, we shouldn't even try to understand. Because it's not like, Conche, se liberó todo mis abuelas. Pero I do think that all time is now. So everything that we do has an effect on our lineage. And recently, los compas que nos regaló la bandera de Palestina, Devin, I'm forgetting her last name, but Devin is Palestinian from Chile. And he reminded me also that to think forward when we do our healing work as well. We can either leave our trauma behind, and that's the legacy we leave, or we could do our work, or we can leave a triunfo. Eso fue lo que nos dijo la abuela Cucuya. Podemos también, we can also pass on the triumph. Those are always the places that we need to be curious. ¿Será que ya sea así? A mí no me gusta that. Okay. Where is that? Where is that that thing, that rejection? Where is it really live? So I think that's part of the lineage work, where we have to get curious about what we don't like and whether we have it. Ese es parte del trabajo del linaje. And we do it for them too, because the ancestors who are not ascended, they need those. That work helps to elevate them and free them, which is also freeing us and elevating us. the easy separations that we have in a society that is tropicolonia, post-colonial, whatever you want to call it, after this, after the start of all of the separation pieces, is tricky and not always the most effective way to move. And lineage work for me is about that. Like, hay una canción ahí que todo es familia. Plantas y animales, todo es sagrado. Montañas y mar, todo es sagrado. Todo es mi familia. And like that's not something we want to recognize. We want the darkness to exist outside of us. It's a little more tangled than that. También, pensando en Devin, who's a short visit but so magical, and he also said to us that part of our work is to honor some ancestors and to betray others. And I really think that's also a part of the lineage work. We get real fixated on the wounds, and that was the part that I had to get eased up on, because it's the slippery slope. They survived, so what else did they pass on as part of what we need to investigate? And a lot of that, especially coming from a poor family, not both of my lineages are equally poor, but there are things that you won't be able to get from the written record. So you have to go elsewhere to find out. And I think some of what comes up somatically gives us cues, and loosening our grip on the story.
Thank you for raising that. A lot of us talk about ancestors as this blanket place of magical wisdom, and it is wisdom, because whether it's good or, I just say, a negative or positive force, it's all wisdom that can guide us. But this idea of our ancestors as being like these, they have this special immunity and this benevolence, right? Like we want to honor some but not others. So we're not thinking about the very let's say the not so hot ancestors when we talk about that work. So the importance of, I love that you said the not ascended ancestors needing our work to help lift them. We're always, it can be very extractive, the relationship with ancestors. We're asking for guidance, asking for blessings, but so much of our work is also giving to them.
And that's the rematriation, that's that restoration piece, because the reciprocal is fundamental to the wisdom of the land. Right? And extraction is more an inheritance of colonialism and capitalism. But if everything is my family, if everything is sacred, I can't always just be like, so see, niveles de cortisol, I can say, wow, what a beautiful purple, esa flor, gracias. You know, not forgetting that piece. It's super.
Sometimes I don't record my questions, and then I'm like, what was the context of this answer? I was thinking about when I said something about ancestor, el linaje femenino, and that there's so many binaries, right? Like I wrote something today about choosing a side is also binary. Like whether you're here or there, that's a binary, because we feel that we have to commit to one side. And if we have to leave, then we're betraying one side. Like that being compartmentalized into a side, into a decision, or vilified by it is a binary. And so I've been wanting to ask this because as we're speaking, we're hearing like whether it's cars, planes, voices. Yeah. And something that I shared when I walked in today is observing the oasis, the bosque urbano that you've created here. Because I'm realizing that in all the ways that you allow transcend these imposed binaries, this is another way. Mm-hmm. Being in an urban space and just claiming the bosque within it. Like this is so beyond the vuelto, so beyond the conuco. This is like whole bosque microcosm, as I called it. So how do you navigate or envision, like coming from New York, which is seen more as an urban experience? Not that all of New York is urban, and now being here in what is an urban surrounding, but claiming the land and claiming the plants, or however you want to speak to them.
¿Cuál es la diferencia entre estar en Nueva York y aquí?
No, como que trascender el binario de urbano-campo, ¿verdad? Es como que aquí han creado un balance, una armonía entre ambas cosas. Es lo que creo yo. Pero I don't know if you see it that way.
Sí, definitivo. O sea, es constante ajuste. Pero I feel like it's really just the path that has led us to these things. Not necessarily that they were conscious decisions, but that we were looking for a place suitable for this dream I had, and the plants were always a part of it. But someone was who was not accessible really, where we were living, so we were separate the idea. A lot was addicted, and I have a really deep story about that. And then we got here, and I was like, what? Yeah, this is it. And the first plant was a camandula, which is an ancestral seed. And that was gifted to us by an artesana in Guabate who makes rosarios, which later we learned rosarios, which is mi apellido, because the rosarios were like that syncretic cover for honra a la madre, a la tabé. So making them with camandula was that syncretic key para darlo a algo que no era el catolicismo. And anyway, she told me, if you have anywhere damp, moist, con mucha humedad, ahí tú tiras esta semilla y ahí se dan. Tiramos las semillas aquí, and that's a plant we always have here now. It's self-sowing. We don't harvest all of them, and because we leave plants till the end of their cycle, mostly here, algunos se caen, el viento lo lleva y después lo tenemos en otro lugar. And I just feel like, no, poco a poco, pues me interesa tal planta, la damiana. And people would come through the space. Like one of our first visitors was Mainline Rock, who's now Kuya. And they are herbalists. And so they know a lot about plants. And so we said, well, we have this curiosity, we have this longing, we have this desire. We can't do decolonization without a plantita. And they showed us, and they helped us plant plants, and they brought la campana de la montaña de ¿cómo se llama? Coronero. Y la damiana vino de Florida. This is hilarious. And it's actually Jamaican damiana, not the damiana that grows here. Well, it grows here too, but Jamaican damiana, which here they call damiana falsa. Then we learned, okay, but you must have another name, my dear. Your name is not false this. What is your real name? It's like Ram Dashalom o algo así. Anyway, and then we started to notice, I feel like where I'm trying to go with this is like, because we would be interested in certain plants and certain medicines, or be gifted seeds and be open to planting them here, then we started to be able to recognize plants, which I feel like is a whole nother layer of depth for a diaspora person like me. No shit about plants, really. Mira, la damiana está en todas partes aquí. All my neighbors have it as ornamental. And I was like, please, can you bring me a damiana plant? And they shipped it in from Florida. Y estaba aquí ya. So I feel like the plants are key to anchoring into making the space into that oasis. You know, of course, me and Lau, we do our part because we help care. We're the direct caregivers for the plants, but they are the ones who anchor the space and who help bring balance. I can't say for sure about how that relates to New York, because for me, I grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in Rockland County and the Lower Hudson Valley. Twice exiled, as I called it when I was a dramatic teenager in college, and I started to learn all these things because I didn't grow up in a radical family. So for me, there was like I never felt at home there, but I had access to the land, and we had a patio. I had a few plants that I related to, a tree that I climbed, a crabapple tree. Una piedra grande frente a la casa. But because I really didn't feel like I belonged, or that I somehow knew intuitively it wasn't home for me. But I feel like that's a later wisdom that I have now. Like, mira, en verdad, la tierra is everywhere. And I feel like that's what diaspora, it's not realistic for all diaspora people to return for many reasons, including their own, whatever, the conditions. Home is when you're a person who comes from other places, isn't always going to be returning. Pero you can return to the land wherever you are. But I didn't know that then. I didn't have any way of relating to plants. Y el clima tampoco. Okay, it just never really felt right. And I don't come from a family that cared for plants, so I didn't have that easy connection. And when I left, I had no interest in coming back. And then I lived in places where partially I started to have chronic pain or I had difficulty. I was on my grad school track. It's interesting to me that I didn't name an anthropologist. Maybe it's softening in my identity, but it's there. And the plants started becoming more present for me when I was in pain, and they were helping to support me and help to heal me. And I wasn't where I grew up at that time, but I was in rural places, Ithaca, Maine. And Maine is actually archipelagic as well. It has a lot of islands. It's crazy amount of islands. And I live near the water there. So there was like some things that were starting to come into my awareness, into my field, but later in life. And provocado por el dolor. But it could be something as simple as walking barefoot. We can be both settler and native wherever we are. So algo por esa línea.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel that way with the states. I should say with Turtle Island. I feel very connected to the lands. And I discovered here that growing up in New York City, I was an island girl. Mm-hmm. That it was very much, and it feels like the archipelago there because I grew up in Brooklyn and always close to the water and crossing bridges and tunnels to get to work and school. And so I love that you said Maine had this archipelago feeling to it because that's how I feel between Brooklyn and Queens. Lo que Jamaica Bay, the Rockaways y todo eso.
Yeah.
A ver, lo que te llega relacionado a eso, a la oscuridad y la bioluminiscencia.
Okay. One of the first things that blew my mind about when I started learning more about our indigenous or Taino way of thinking is that the day begins in the night. O sea, life begins, or like todo empieza en la oscuridad, which also goes right with the wisdom of the womb, like life begins in the womb kind of thing. So when I think about darkness, I feel like that's also a reclaiming or reclaiming, coming into a deeper understanding of what we have been disconnected from, which is not that it's all love and light. And actually, there's something deeply powerful and fertile about the dark. And I know in a lot of other indigenous Turtle Island community, they'll start when they're doing the saludar las direcciones para abrir espacio con el este. Pero aquí empiezan muchos de los abuelos en el oeste. Or in the south, depending on who you're working with. El agua también está en el oeste, en esa cosmovisión. So that's something. I just recently had the opportunity to go to the bioluminescent bed in Boriken, which I had never visited. I'd only ever been to the one in Fajardo and the one in Paguera. One of the things that I hadn't thought about, que uno de los compas que estaban dando el tour dijo, era como que this could also be it's a mode of defense. Okay. Yo hago ilumino para defenderme. And I think there was something for me really important, and like also in the same Sunday flipping the script of the darkness and the light. I'm like, oh, my light can be my defense. O sea, es mi defensa. No es mi debilidad, no es mi vulnerabilidad, es mi defensa. Like our arrow as protection, like that truth as protection, like the arrow. So your light can operate in that way, like an arrow. And also the particularity of the bioluminescence, which exists in the seas everywhere, but here in Boriken las condiciones son tal, específico, especial, único, que se da ese fenómeno. Creo que es algo importante. And then even thinking about it as like a communication, which I don't necessarily think that I haven't thought a lot about, but I like the notion that we could be communicating through our light as well. Also, viaje total en Vieques, porque se veían los peces que se iluminaba debajo del agua. Entonces, the awareness that it gives you, the awareness that it brought of how much life was with us, which you wouldn't normally have si está en el kayak de noche encima del agua. O sea, tú tienes que saber, porque pues, pero la luz también, it let us see the light. Que fue un viaje total. And how if you cover up your sight, your peripheral sight, you can see it more. And I was like, what might that suggest? Like metaphorically or however we want to think about it, but just poetically. So, okay, I put on these blinders, me enfoco. I eliminate that peripheral vision para poder recibir la luz de una forma más, como, no sé, palpable, verlo. Put on those blinders. Enfócate. Misterioso.
No puedo contigo. No puedo contigo. Holy shit. Do you have any last things? I want to respond, but I'll do that off camera. Do you have any last things that you want to add?
Gracias, Yasmin.
Oh my God. I think I'm going to have so much to process and enjoy focusing on crossing los montes para atrás para el oeste. Ahí viene de verdad la lluvia.
Tremenda bendición. Gracias, abuelita, por conspirar.
Thank you so much.
Solidarity, love, vibes to the people of Palestine, to the people, the volunteers that were sending humanitarian aid on board this flotilla that was intercepted on the Mediterranean waters right near Gaza. And I'm also thinking of LA and just people all across the US risking deportation, trying to live in peace, and everyone across this planet that is living these times, these moments. My news feed right now is a weird juxtaposition of people parading and of people marching and then being hosed down. It's like we entered this time warp where I don't know if it's 1965 or if it's 1968 or if it's 2025 or if it's 1898. So with that said, I'm very grateful to Millie for writing this book that speaks about so many beautiful initiatives of Boricuas doing their thing, moving past disaster, and not embodying that concept in fear as they want us to do, and instead embracing the heart space as she opens the book, going into the heart space and moving from that centered place to build and embody collective futures today. You can tune into future episodes every new and full moon when I post them. For more information about the project Rematriating Boriken, you can visit rematriatingboriken.com. That's rematriating with an M, and Boriken with K-E-N. And Rematriating Boriken is also on Instagram and Facebook. So you can follow us there. If you like this, please give a like and a share. If you want updates for future posts, subscribe to this channel on YouTube. And thank you again so much for listening. In light always. This is Yasmin.